So in this video, I'll be giving some hints on how to study life sciences. So there's quite a lot of few people that has asked me, ma'am, how do I study for life sciences? There's so many pictures, there's diagrams to label, there's all sorts of big words that we need to memorize, and spelling is important, and what if I spell it incorrectly? So how do I get all this weird new information into my head and not forget it? So I'm going to give some of my hints that I think works best, and along with this video on Schoology there will be some worksheets and actual examples of what I was talking about. So now, in my opinion, obviously when one studies for any subject, you have two options. The first option will be to study directly from the book, and the second option would be to make your own summaries. Now, learning from the book works if it's not that much work. But sometimes the book gives the information in just paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs, and it ends up being so boring and I just can't get it in my head. So often the best thing is to actually make your own summaries, because when you make your own summaries, you can rewrite the information in a way that is interesting to you and that is eye-catching to you. And summaries actually helps a lot when you get to grade 12 and if you're going to go to university, because if you have a lot of information to remember, you cannot just read it from the book and remember it. So let's start from scratch. So let's say you are studying grade 10 life sciences and you got your exam guidelines, and the exam guidelines for grade 10s for June exam says that you need to learn the microscope, cells, and mitosis. So if we look at microscopes, section B, that's on page 8. Okay, so I'm going to open my textbook. Great stuff. And I see there's the microscope. And obviously, the study guides, let's say all of this stuff is not important. All right. Ma'am said that we need to basically only study that diagram with its parts and how to take care of it. Now, when we look at this diagram, now let's decide. You have to decide, do you think it's best to learn this from the book, or is it best to make your own summaries? Now, in the case of a picture like this, if you just want to learn from the book, obviously that'll be great. You can take a piece of paper and you can go one by one. You can obviously read, that's the eyepiece, read its function. There we go. And then when you test yourself, you put the page like this and you're like, okay, what was that again? Oh, I think it was the eyepiece. Let's check. Yes, I'm right. That's the eyepiece. That is called the body tube. Yes. So you can actually do that. That's perfectly fine. But how would I take this microscope and take this picture and make my own summaries? Because if you're not the best artist and you don't want to do that, how are you going to do that? Now, first of all, when I said learn from the book or make your own summaries, in both those instances, there's something that is very, very, very important that you always need to do. Now, first of all, whether you make your own summaries or you learn from your book, you need to do the following. You have to actually, in both these cases, read whatever was written down. So whether it's your own or from the textbook, you're going to read it. What you're going to do shortly after is you're going to rewrite whatever you've read. You're going to rewrite it. Now, why that's important is because you're not only supposed to know the knowledge, you're going to ask to be writing the answers in the test or in the exam. So if you don't rewrite it at home, how the heck are you going to learn the spelling to rewrite in the exam? So once you've read the information, rewrite it. Once you've done that, repeat what you have written and what you have read, but do that while you talk out loud. So you need to actually be in a place where you can speak to yourself in your bedroom or in your study or somewhere where no one's going to annoy you or interrupt you, and you're not going to feel like an idiot when you speak to yourself. So make sure that when you study either from the book or from your own summaries, that you read it out loud, that you rewrite that information on a piece of paper. Whether you keep the paper or not doesn't actually matter. And then you repeat that information without looking at the book. You're going to repeat it out loud. Then obviously for both reading from a book or from summaries, the last step you then do is you must set some kind of test for yourself. You need to test yourself whether you actually know what you've learned, if you've remembered it. Now that test can actually be pictures. You can use pictures to make a test for yourself. I'm going to show you some examples. What works really, really nicely is making your own cue cards. That's really nice. You can actually make a big poster for yourself and stick it against the cupboard, or you can list. Now, I love making lists, and I'll also show you some of those examples. So let's go back to the microscope. Let's pretend we need to study the microscope. So to study the microscope, I'm going to open my textbook. I'm on page 9, and now I'm ready to study the microscope. So I look at this picture, and out loud, I'm going to read. I'm going to not learn everything at the same time. I'm going to just learn those on the right-hand side. So I'm going to say to myself, I read it. Okay, the top thingy coming out the top is the eyepiece, and it magnifies the specimen being studied. Now, you're allowed to actually say that in your own words. Eyepiece is obviously, you have to know that. But magnifies the specimen being studied. Magnifies, I'm going to put it in my own words and say, it makes whatever I'm looking at bigger. So it enlarges. It enlarges. So eyepiece. Eyepiece. So what I've done now is I've actually read it out loud. Now I'm going to rewrite it. So I'm going to take a piece of paper and I'm going to cover it like this. And then I'm going to write. That is the eyepiece. And just to make sure I know it, I'm write it again. It's the eyepiece. Okay? And then what I do is I put my hand on there, I cover it, and I say it out loud to myself. The top little tube is called the eyepiece. It's called the eyepiece. Great. Then I'm going to go to the next guy. That's the body tube. Okay? So, again, I read it out loud to myself. Then I'm going to rewrite it, okay? And I'm going to rewrite it, and I'm going to check the spelling. It's the body tube. Okay, it's the body tube. And then I cover that with my hand, and I say it out loud. Okay, body tube. Now, before I go to the third thing, before I go to the third label, I actually see... Can I remember the first two? And I've got an ant helping me study. So, the first one was the eyepiece, and the second one is the body tube. I say it out loud. I speak to myself like I'm teaching myself. And then do I check? Yes, I was right. Great. Now I can go to the third one. So, I learn the third one, learn the fourth one, cover it, check that I know all of them again. Then I go to the fifth, then I go to this. So, that's how you do it. You will read each one individually out loud. Then you rewrite them so you make sure you know the spelling. Then you repeat it out loud to yourself. Once you've done this with the entire picture, so now you think, okay, I know the whole picture. Now I need to test myself. So obviously the way I taught you just now, I said you can just put a piece of paper on there and then you can test yourself. Okay, I think that's the eyepiece. Yep, I'm right. That's the body tube. Yep, that is. Great. But you know how tests are? You're not necessarily going to get this exact picture. You might get another picture, or even worse, you get it in a multiple choice or match the columns type thing. So now you need to set a test for yourself in a way that you can make sure that you actually do know this, not just as a picture. And I'm going to show you how to do this as a list. So here you can see I made a table listing the parts of the microscope on the left hand side column, and then each of those parts functions on the right hand side. So what you can do then is you can either cover the right hand side, test yourself by naming the left, or cover the left hand side column and answer the right hand side. So by covering either side, you test yourself. It's also a good idea to Google another picture of a microscope and then label it. Because in that way, you can't be surprised by any weird picture in the exam that is not the same as your textbook. Now, make sure, obviously, when you Google a picture with labels, which is similar to your textbook, And then just cover those as you study and test yourself that you know it. So let's say we are now looking at the next chapter. Let's say the cell. And we need to study cells. And what we're going to do, remember, we just said, so there's the cells, okay. Now, what we said is whatever we learn, do we learn it from the book? Do we learn it from summaries? Whichever way, we're going to read it, rewrite it, and then repeat it out loud, and then we're going to test ourselves. So we've already done a list. That's how we learned the microscope. So let's try and make cue cards. That would actually work really well with a picture as well. So if you look at the picture of the cell, the plant cell and the animal cell, there's a lot of labels around. So although it's a picture to learn, we can learn it the same way as we did the microscope, by going one word at a time, like that. Then also on the next page, it gives you a lot of detail regarding the functions and the structures. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make cue cards. So I take my paper and I prepare how I'm going to make my cue cards. I'm a bit lazy, so let's quickly make our cue cards, cheating a little bit. So now that I've got a whole pile of cue cards, I'm going to start with a picture. And I see at the top there, I need to know what the cell membrane is, where it is, and what its function is. So then I'm going to go to the next page. I'm going to find cell membrane, which is right there. And then I'm going to take my cue card and I'm going to make a summary. So on the one side, I'm going to write down cell membrane. And then on the other side of my card, I'm going to summarize this information. So firstly, I will use my highlighter to highlight the key concepts, the key words, and then only rewrite the key words onto the cue cards. So I take my highlighter, I find the important information, I highlight it, obviously carefully, reading intently, and then I take a piece of paper, the back of my cue card, and I just rewrite, even if it's in my own words, the important information that I've just highlighted. I try and make it as short as possible. That's the whole point of a summary. So the aim is that I make a cue card like this for every one of the labels on these pictures. So I've just done the cell membrane. So what I then do is I can test myself when I'm done, and I can actually cover the picture like so, and I can say label number 1 there is the cell membrane. Let's see if I'm right. Yes, it is indeed the cell membrane. And then what is its structure and its function like? And then, oh, okay, it's found in plant and animal cells only. It encloses the cytoplasm. It's living. It's got 2 layers of phospholipid molecules. We call it the fluid mosaic molecule. And then it controls what goes in and out of the cell. Now, what's nice about cue cards is if you make a cue card like this, you just made one for the cell membrane. If you go and you make one for the for the endoplasmic reticulum, and you make another one for the mitochondria, and you make another one for the cytoplasm, you do the same thing. Find the label, highlight, make a new cue card, and then the next one, make a new cue card. You'll soon have a whole pile of cue cards of all this information that you can actually use to label this picture as well. So that's how you make your cue cards. Then what you can do is you can always take a little paper clip, stick it in there and save it so that you can use it again in the June exam, in the November exam. It's not a waste. You don't have to redo the whole thing again, and it's a nice revision for in case you need it in the November exam. So remember we said when we study, we read out loud, we rewrite it, and we repeat it out loud, and then we test ourselves. So if we look at the 3rd section in the textbook that we said will be needed for the grade 10 exams, which would be the mitosis chapter, which is number D. Mitosis is actually quite a lot of diagrams. So when we look at the mitosis, it's a process. Okay, so there's mitosis on page 15. But then when we go and we look at page 16, there's a lot of diagrams and it's a process. So in this case, mitosis, it'll be really nice to learn it as pictures or as a poster. Now you can actually make cue cards. You can actually make cue cards of every process and then either paste them on a poster, or instead of the cue card just having a word on, we can actually, where's the cue cards we have now? If we have cue cards like this for the cell membrane like we did previously, you can actually now go, and if you make a cue card, for example, for interphase, instead of just making cue cards, you'll take that and you'll write interphase, but along with that, you'll actually make a simple picture. Just a simple picture. And then when you've studied, you've summarized that, and the key information is in the back, you will list them by packing them out in a specific order. So you will have your interphase, then your prophase, then your metaphase. So you will basically, to learn the process of mitosis, like in the textbook on page 15, 16, you will also use the method of making cue cards, but your cue cards will include pictures, and when you learn them, you will learn them not just as cue cards with information at the back like you did with a cell membrane, but you will also have a basic little picture in, and they will go in a specific order. So the key thing is that you decide which method do you want to use when you study. Whatever you use, whether it's directly from the book or from summaries, you always have to read out loud the information first, then rewrite it by hand on a piece of paper somewhere, just so you can practice the spelling. Then you repeat it out loud for yourself. The more you read, rewrite, and repeat, the better. And then you have to test yourself in some way. Now, if you decide in this exam to make a way of testing yourself, whether you make lists or posters or cue cards or pictures, you are very welcome to bring these to me at any time or email them to me to help you, just check you. Okay, so if you go into Schoology, you'll actually see there's quite a few lists already and some pictures there that you are welcome to print and cut out and use and make your own cue cards. So happy studies, all of the best. If you need any more help to help you study, I help you memorize all the things, make your own summaries, just let me know.